Okay, listen. This means you got it.
You play.
That means you didn't. She didn't get it. Okay? Does everyone got that? So I'm gonna point like which way, but you guys should know.
Okay, I'm ready.
Hey, Miss Channing.
Haley Potter.
That way.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Say it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Lila.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Say it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Acadia.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Say it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
This is either Cadence or Haley Keller.
Which one?
Say it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Haley Keller. Haley Keller.
Hey, Miss Channing.
Haley Keller.
Hey, Miss Channing.
Say it again.
Hey, Miss Channing.
Millie.
Hey, Miss Channing.
Say it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Melody.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Isabel.
Hey, Miss Channing.
Brooklyn.
Hey, Miss Channing.
Mila.
Hey, Miss Channing.
Hadley.
Hey, Miss Channing.
Cammie.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Say it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Claire.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Wait, shh, don't laugh. Say it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Eleanor.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Callie.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Say it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Nia.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Cadence.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Say it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Ooh, I don't know. Wait. Again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Tinley.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Say it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Lila's mom. Wait, okay, go next.
Hey, Miss Channing.
Do it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Claire. I must have gotten that one right.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Do it again. Do it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
I have no idea. I have no idea. Can they go in the back line? I don't know.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Ava.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Cameron.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Penelope.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Molly.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Wait, do it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Lauren.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Kinsley.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Gabby.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Tony.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Bella.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Grace.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
I know this voice. Again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Sydney.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
I know this voice. One more time.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Oh, I know this voice. Again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
I don't know. Can you go to the back of the line? Can you try again?
Hey, Miss Channing.
Again?
Hey, Miss Channing.
One more time.
Hi, Miss Channing.
I want to say Penelope, but I already said Penelope.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Again?
Hi, Miss Channing.
I'm getting worse. I don't know. Can you go to the back line?
Hey, Miss Channing.
Miss Kelly? That was Sarah.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Lily.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Grayson.
Grayson. Hi, Miss Channing.
We're at the end of the line again.
Do it again. Do it
Hi,
again.
Miss Channing.
I want to say Acadia, but it's not, is it? Yeah, can you scooch forward?
Hi, Miss Channing.
Ava Murray.
Yeah.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
I want to say Tinley, but Tinley? Tinley.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Kayla.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Belle.
Now have these people go again.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
People that you failed trying.
Okay, okay.
Ooh, I just stepped on something wet and squishy. Hi, Miss Channing.
Sadie.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Wait. Shh. Say it again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Cadence.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Lily.
Their voices sound so similar.
Hi, Miss Channing.
One more time.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Rose.
Hey, Miss Channing.
Miss Sarah.
You got Miss Channing.
Wait again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Michaela.
That's funny.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Again.
Hi, Miss Channing. Come on, you got it.
I want to say Eleanor.
The one you keep.
Again.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Louder.
Hi, Miss Channing.
Screaming.
Hi, Miss Channing.